the chat open or do we change to Q&A? Tell me what we have here.
They have the ability to submit questions via Q&A.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, because I'm just trying to figure out how many things I got to try to keep open on my screen, you know, working with technology. I'm like, okay.
For all the attendees, please submit your questions in Q&A. You should see a Q&A at the bottom of your screen.
Okay. All righty. All right, I'm ready whenever we're ready.
I think you should proceed. We're right at 1:47, so please proceed.
Okay, let me get this off of my screen. Now, how do I know that folks can hear me? Okay, next question. Josh, tell me what.
No one is saying that they cannot hear you, so they should all be able to hear you just fine.
Okay, wonderful. Very good. Well, thank you all for joining this afternoon. I'm Renee Redwood, and delighted to present this workshop, for lack of a better term. I had told some friends it was going to be a one-woman conversation because I didn't have a panel, so it would give me a chance to kind of just talk to myself with you all. So work with me on this. I wanted to try to change the ambiance of this presentation. And so I've pulled a lot from just currency of information off social media to try to tell a story here around how we can look at an equity-centered reorientation to the workspace in a COVID reality. And I don't use the term post-COVID because we're not post. And I don't know when we will be. And so it is a COVID reality. It will ebb and flow. And so I wanted to make sure we set that context. And the term I use, workspace, because workplace for many people connotes a place, a physical office, entity, an environment. But workspace recognizes wherever we are doing work. And given the nature of the volume of remote work that takes place, I think workspace ultimately will become a term that we should consider adapting and using to appropriately communicate what kind of culture we're trying to set. It's not just in a physical space, but it's how we interact with one another. And so as we start to move in and out of our shelter in place, there's several things I think that we can begin to think about and do differently to create an equity-centered reorientation to our workplace. So with that, let me begin. So I wanted to lay out just some objectives for this discussion. And I'd like to be able to have a conversation, Josh, at some point to be able to have, you know, to be able to stop and take questions. So I'm not
sure. Let's. I'm gonna go ahead and allow everyone to talk.
Okay.
And most of them are on mute right now because they're listening to you. But they will, when you're ready and you call for them, they'll be able to talk.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Because I'd like to have a conversation. You know, we spend so much time in front of our technology that part of this is being able to create that workspace culture. So I wanted to be able to address, and what I wrote back in April when all I could think was COVID, that how can leaders address and manage a trauma experienced workforce? We are all traumatized. If you are not traumatized, please raise your hand. And not that I could actually see it because I can't see all the screen, but in principle, okay? And then how can we as women, as leaders, and how can leaders begin to set expectations for the new workspace, articulate a framework for our organization in terms of both OSHA, I would say OSHA, occupational safety hazard, kind of workplace safety. What does it mean when we talk about physical distancing? And employment policies. Again, safety in the workplace is also about the notion of how we're treated, how we're respected, what kind of a culture do we have, what's the organizational climate, what's the smell of the place. So the employment practices, do we feel safe in the organization? So it's safety both in terms of our physical and mental health safety, but as well as our employment practice safety. And then the opportunity to use this pause that we've had in the workplace, but use this as a moment to kind of reset our practices to align with our institutional values, such as equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so those are the things I was thinking when I put this workshop together, when I was asked what I could speak about, that I thought I might be able to add some value to. So it's my hope that you do find something in this presentation that is of value to you. The premise I'm working on is that we're in a confluence of crises, right? And so we have an opportunity as we go back into a new norm, a new environment. We have to unlearn some things to relearn some new things. We need to really be able to figure out what are some of the things we can let go of that were part of our institutional cultures, and how we operated with one another and interacted with one another. And what are some of the things we want to bring into that allows us to focus on this notion of equity? Part of that is how do we create brave spaces? And I don't know if any of you have had a chance to read this by Mickey Scott Bay Jones, but it's an invitation to brave space. And I am going to read this one just because I want us to understand how we have opportunities to set the context, right? Set expectations. It's no longer the need to be able to get into a safe space, but a brave space, because what might be safe for some may not be safe for others. And so she writes, together we will create brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have a responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. This is a space that I hope we begin to create as we emerge and begin to think of equity as how we center ourselves when we're at work, regardless of where that might be. And so here's my storyline. So just work with me, folks, okay? So we're under attack, and yet some carried on with business as usual, you know? And I think we were under attack by what? A virus, a pandemic, right? And yet we had people who denied it, people who carried on like nothing happened, and we still have that happening now. We have what's part of the confluence of crisis, supremacy structures and systems and systemic prejudice. You know, this is The Economist that made this cover. This wasn't a Renee Redwood cover. The Economist, and this was in 2017. So part of what has created the climate and the context in which we are now operating and seeking to emerge from by creating a new norm, a new sense of reality, a new way of being, particularly in the workplace. Some of us were barely hanging on to a sense of safety and security, but we held on firmly as the only option. How many of us had through this time and still question, you know, how much more can we take? We're here at the house with with the kids, with the dog, with the cat, with the parent, worried about this, that, the other thing. You can't get your grocery. You finally got your grocery. It wasn't what you actually ordered. If you got it, you're thankful because you have a home. You're thankful you've got a place to stay. You're thankful you got internet. But what about those who did not? That's part of why we want to look at an equity-centered approach to what we do, right? We're all at different places of coping and thriving. We're moving at different paces, yet we've been called back to work. So when I say that we're a trauma-informed body, a trauma-informed community, a trauma-informed organization, a trauma-informed world, we're all in different places at dealing with this trauma and still living through it for too many. And just what FYI, these pictures, people either send them to me or I've gotten them off the internet. And I just think they tell so many stories that we can't necessarily communicate so fully in words, which is why I believe in STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, right? It gives us a human approach, brings a humanistic element to it. We saw infrastructures collapsed and some are still crumbling. And I love this because it was the library. You know, what have we not learned, right? What have we not learned? And what can we learn, right? It's visible and visceral breakage also means opportunities to build anew. So much of what we've been seeing go on, but so much of what we've been feeling, the fullness of our persons have experienced the COVID. And now the racial strife, but it's been going on for such a long time, but there's a greater awareness, right? And so the institutions of systemic racism and bias, those are institutions and strategies that also have an opportunity to crumble, to allow us to get to an equity-centered place. You know, so what's our status for reentry? And I love this little cartoon, the emotional support dog after I get done telling it my problems, you know, the days, that's what it felt like. So when we talk about what's our status in reentry, temperature check in terms of physical, right? The physical, you go in the temperature check in some places before you can enter, right? But how do you feel? What's your thermometer? Where are you? Where are you? Getting in touch with where you are in dealing with these multiple insults to our humanity, to our person, to our character, to our family, to our colleagues, to our nation, right? So how are you? And I say when we ask that question, part of being able to show up and center equity is don't ask questions you don't want people to answer. So don't ask somebody, how are you, if you don't really want to hear that they've got somebody in their family is ill, that they've had their Wi-Fi is on and off. I mean, go on and on and on, right? So how else can we begin to greet each other? But we also have to recognize, how are we? How am I? How are we? That's part of the trauma, recognizing that. Trauma-informed approach to establishing a new norm. Since we all have experienced something that wasn't necessarily positive over these last few months, last few years, decades, some of us, right? How do we use that to inform how we come back together in community, in team? How do we set expectations? What should we be looking for? For those of us who have opportunities to lead, which we all do, how do we help set expectations, not only for ourselves, but for others? And then how do we become reacquainted with our people, with our teams? We've all been through different experience of this crisis, of this confluence of crises, right? We've all experienced shelter in place differently. And so we're different. We're not the same as when we went in, you know? So we're having an opportunity to return to work, and we're different than we were before. You know, I give the example of myself. What was before? If a Black woman works a 40-year career, she will lose $946,120 due to a wage gap. Okay, I'm different than before. I want this gap fixed. I want it fixed now. I am very different before. I knew it before, but I'm looking at the data and I know it and I know my experience. And so it's different. I'm now going to have more of a voice, you know? And so I say, but we have a new arsenal and a resilience. We've made it this far. We can keep going. We're coming out of a chrysalis. For those who know what a chrysalis, that's what a caterpillar encapsulates itself in a chrysalis as it transforms, metamorphoses. So we're coming out of this chrysalis where we kind of lock down. Shelter yourself. Don't touch nothing. Don't let nobody touch you. Don't touch a knob. Clean your iPhone. Wipe your milk carton off when you bring it to the house. We've been in this chrysalis, this cocoon, wrapped up, scared, but we had things to protect us. Now we have an opportunity to make inequities of all kinds become vestiges of the past. That's part of this resilience. That's part of our ability to center equity, to do things differently, to establish new norms. And so we have to unlearn and learn new ways. We need to unlearn and deal with our issues around bias and stereotypes and unlearn the behaviors that demonstrate those. And we can learn respect and dignity and demonstration of equity. Institutional barriers and inequity. We need to be addressing those very concretely and unlearn the practices that we have done forever, the norm. Oh, that's the way we always do it. Well, maybe we need to think about doing it differently. Maybe a more inclusive set of practices might be at hand and available for us to use. We need to deal with the issue of microaggressions. Microaggressions, those are the indignities, the slights to individuals, and they happen they're common daily practices, sadly. And oftentimes they're not done with intention. They're unintentional, unconscious. And so how do we create space? How can we listen, learn, and when we find ourselves having offended someone, apologize, right our wrongs, microaggressions, right? In silence, we've been silent on many of these things around equity far too long. So we can lift our voice, even if it shakes. Again, the brave space, right? Taking the courage, being willing to take a risk to move forward. Some of the things we need to unlearn, we need to learn about so we can let go of, right? Implicit association test. If you have not taken it, take it. It's about our biases and how they show up. Once you take it and you become aware of your bias, you now have a choice to do something differently. When we look at the notion around biases and barriers, things we need to get rid of and let go of. This is my world order. This is the world I live in, right? Bias and barriers, institutional and structural. Let me take a moment here for a couple of folks to add comments. What are some of the institutional barriers that you see within your organization that you can say we need to let go of? And I don't know where to look, if it's coming in the chat, I don't know, or people are just going to speak.
Everyone can, if you want, you can unmute yourself and you can talk to Renee.
Oh, good. I can see everybody, kind of. Okay, well, I'm gonna keep going. Keep going. Let me just keep going. Let me keep moving. Let me move this over here. See, even just getting the technology. Since we've been in a lockdown, I have talked to myself a lot more than usual. It's never good when you have an argument and you don't win on either side. Consequent trauma, okay? But the barriers, what are some of those barriers within your workplace, in your workspace, that are structural, that negate equity, that deny the full dignity and respect of individuals to be the best of who they can be and to bring their greatest assets to be in service to the organization mission? The microaggressions we had talked about. Well, here's a definition just so that we all have a shared understanding of what these are. They're brief, commonplace, daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, negative, prejudicial slights and insults towards any group, particularly culturally marginalized groups. Is someone trying to get on? Let me keep moving.
Sandra, did you have a question?
No, I thought I was on mute. I guess not.
We hear you. We hear you. So as we're saying on this one, let me just go back a minute here. So on the microaggressions, how do we address that? We have to give voice to it. It's not okay. It's not okay to be quiet about it. If you experience it, see it, are the target of it, you hear it, say something, right? How do we create a learning culture within our organization? That's part of demonstrating equity. Create an opportunity to ask questions, to share how it made you. Here's what I heard. Is that what you intended? Right? One of the protocols for that is understanding the roles that we can play. And are they different? There's a protocol, Ouch, Your Silence Hurts. It's a wonderful protocol. It can be done within an hour for your team. But it talks about the different roles that we can play. The goal is that we no longer stay silent, right? That we speak up, that we stop just being a bystander and looking at it, that we actually start to think about what's happening, be conscious. And the goal is for us to be proactive allies, to be able to speak up when we hear a disrespect, when we see a lack of dignity being demonstrated to an individual. Part of the reentry is how do we create this aspirational culture or vision, right? Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. So how do we use our energy, right? Energy is neither created nor destroyed, it's simply transformed. How do we use that energy to transform our environment? How do we use it to transform ourselves?
Well,
yes.
I would say that for me, I find that I often speak out against any type of like microaggression or any type of biases, and I'll call people out. I'll say, did you really say that, or did you hear what you just said? Just so that they can take a moment to hear themselves or acknowledge the fact that they said something incorrect, right? Or something that may make someone else feel uncomfortable. But I always find myself, feeling like I'm the only one. And mind you, the majority of the time when I'm in meetings or whatever, I find myself being the only person of color. And so I have to say it, or I'll find others are uncomfortable saying something. So, you see it, you hear it, you have to say something, but it is.
And you can
so
ask your
difficult.
colleagues, right? Maybe what you need to, you can consider doing is asking them, did anyone else hear it like this? If so, please say something,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have a moment, one of the biggest things we're hearing right now, and we're seeing a lot happening, is around finding allies, finding others with shared values. And are they willing to be brave? And so maybe part of the bravery is for you simply to ask, is there anyone else here that would actually support or be offended if this is how you heard this? Ask. There's an exercise that you can do. Who am I talking to? Because I can't see on this thing.
I am so sorry. This is Juanita. Log me in.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for sharing. Let me just say one thing. If you have not had a chance to see Being Black by Miss Jane Elliott, it's a link in YouTube. And she asked the question, Jane Elliott was the originator of the blue eye, brown eyes experiment that was done at the time of Dr. King's assassination. And she taught at an all-white elementary school. And she had the children come in to understand what the bias and prejudice was. And she had the brown-eyed children get one set of treatment, and the blue-eyed children got a different set of treatment. She now asked an audience, many years later, she says to an all-white audience, please stand up if you want to be treated the way Black people want to be treated. Nobody stands up. She says, well, let me repeat it again. Do you want to be treated the way Black people are treated in this country? And no one says. She said, well, the reason you don't stand is because you know how they're treated and you don't want to be treated the same way. Sometimes we have to ask those questions of our colleagues. We're going to go on with the slide that talks about values, what you stand for and what you don't stand for. Right? So, thank you for being brave. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for modeling the behavior that we hope to see in others in the workplace. Let me keep moving because I think some of this will hit on some of the values. Some of the strategies for disrupting the default, because again, we don't want to keep going back to what we just came from. People are like, oh, we want to go back to the good old days. For who? For who? Good for whom? Right? I don't want to go back to unequal pay. Right? I don't want to go back to microaggressions. I don't want to go back to having a limited opportunity for a promotion. I don't want to go back just to be questioned because of my identity, whether I'm competent. I don't want to go back to that. And so how do we begin to disrupt the default? So individual actions and decisions can be automatic or conscious. Part of the interruption is let's make some of these things conscious. That's part of the implicit association test. When you become aware of what your biases are, you get to choose whether you continue to behave and act in the same way or do you do something differently, right? Strategies for disrupting the default, systems, practices, and structures that can facilitate or disrupt the operations of unconscious attitudes and stereotypes. For instance, Renee, what the hell does that mean? That means that we have societal and institutional actions that can actually be put in place that affect and impact other people's behavior within the workspace on how they perceive and operate. It's like the modeling behavior. Leadership has an opportunity to model the behavior of inclusive conduct, right? We look at when a system changes the behavior. Senator Hannah Beth Jackson in California, right? She put in place a system, structural, that in order for a public company, that be a public company in California, the boards had to deal with their diversity, right? That's forcing a change, right? And is beginning to address some of those unconscious attitudes that are expressed within institutions in their conduct, not only in their boards, but how they decide who their executives are, the workplace, who comes in, who stays, who gets access to mentors, who doesn't, those kind of things. and then trying to change individual attitudes without addressing systemic and institutional components is a failed strategy. How long have we been so-called disciplining bad police for doing bad things to Black people? And nothing really has changed, right? So some of this, yes, there's individual responsibility, but there's institutional accountability. And that's part of us being able to change the default, right? You know, what can we reimagine? This allows us to kind of rethink what can the workspace be? It's an opportunity to start something different, to do things differently. What can we test? What's a pilot that you can do? Test one thing, right? And then what are the trade-offs? What are we getting rid of and what are we picking up? What are the negatives? Again, we can be very analytic about doing the right thing, moving and living the values we espouse. How do we align those? I use the tree to communicate values because that's supposedly kind of common, what we have together, right? It's what roots us. Our values define what we stand for and what we will not stand for. You know, what are you willing to stand for in your workplace? What are you willing to tolerate with regard to equity or inequity? You know, how much more do you want to take? Where are the things that you think you should be speaking up, right? Make those kind of assessments. If the values and you can't find some place to move it, you need to question, is this the right place for me? If they can't value my talent, if they don't share the same vision of what an equitable workplace might be, or even at least be willing to have a conversation, maybe I need to bring my talent elsewhere, someplace that will actually use it and value it. You know, what value is most important for your organization to demonstrate? You know, for you, you know, maybe a couple of folks answer, what value is most important for your organization to demonstrate? I can't tell if anybody's writing or nothing. And I'm mumbling to myself, people don't mind me.
So Renee, there's been a couple questions that have come in. Winifred wants to know about the link to the questionnaire that you shared earlier. And Winifred, feel free to unmute yourself and elaborate if you wish.
Please.
Yeah, you had a question and you had a link, I think some few slides before about it's like something that we should take to check our unconscious bias.
Yes, the implicit association test.
Yes, yes.
Oh, no,
You went too quickly, so I wanted the link. Yes.
And we can copy that into, I would say I would copy it into the chat. I'm not while I'm sharing the screen, but I can put it in afterwards.
Okay.
Okay.
And then Juanita, would you like to ask your question that you put in the chat for Renee? Maybe it's more of a comment.
No, that was much more of a comment.
Okay.
I did say what I had to say in regards to microaggressions and biases, and you know, just the whole thing in regards to white privilege and making people hear what they had to say. You know, what did you just say? Did you really just say that? So
yeah, and it's asking a question, and you know, part of it becomes how do we use it as an opportunity to educate? And this is part of the challenge for myself, for a lot of people. Like I hear it and it automatically, and I hate this word triggers, but it triggers me. So I'm not feeling very positive at the moment that I hear it. But how do I how do I transition that energy, right? To say, here's how I heard this, or here's how this made me feel, or this is what I heard. Is this what you intended? Right? So how do we use that as an opportunity? And I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
And Terry had a comment too. Terry, would you like to give your comment?
Can you hear me okay?
A
Yeah.
little bit louder, please.
Okay, sorry, I'm having some Zoom issues today. My comment, you know, let me try to fix this real quick. When you're in a room and someone says something that, in your opinion, is just off or inappropriate, and I've been there a few times, and I actually look around because I don't know if it's, you know, being the only woman in the room or whatever, where you're like, okay, I heard that this way. Did anybody else, like, did that hit anybody else the same way?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't always want to be, you know, the police in the room, so to speak, around, you know, just kind of being appropriate or calling out things, because then you got to deal with, you know, that reputation. But on the flip side, you don't want to sit there and be silent. So one of the things I've learned to do that you mentioned was ask. did you just hear what I heard, or did that come across like, I felt it did?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of raise it as a question like that. And what I find is people pause and
Yes.
replay the sentence and they go, oh yeah, that was not cool, or that was wrong, or that came out wrong. Maybe it wasn't intentional, but just kind of asking the question to people nearby or in the room at least raises awareness. And I feel like you said, unfortunately, over time, right, it's constant training, it's constant education about the way we think and the biases that we have. So.
Yeah, yeah. And I put this slide back up. If you, Ouch, Your Silence Hurts is a fabulous, you can do a 30-minute or 1 hour. It's excellent. And it really walks you through different scenarios as a bystander and how you can become a proactive ally. It's excellent. It is, it's by far one of the best. I've used this as a training tool for years. Leslie Aguilar is the founder and the genius behind this. And if you don't know what else to say, you can always say, ouch. Why? Because when people hear that, they think somebody's hurt or there's some harm. And if nothing else, it causes people to pause, to stop. If nothing, like what happened? All of a sudden now people are paying more attention, right? We've attuned our sense to something. And so it walks you through a series of things. You can ask a question. You can say, I think that, if it's a stereotypical remark, you can say, I think that applies to everyone. Is someone saying something derogatory about a group of people? You can ask, are you referring or speaking about someone in particular? You don't have to say it, just say it with a tone of inquiry. Are you speaking about someone in particular? Oh, could you repeat yourself, please? I don't think I heard that. Okay, I did hear that. And let me tell you what I heard or how it made me feel so that we can use it as an opportunity to educate. And one of the things we know about when people start to speak up, it gives space for other people to. So please keep doing it and keep practicing and ask others to practice with you. Again, that's about creating the brave space, right? And it's changing the energy, right?
So Winifred had a comment about a video. Would you like to share that, Winifred, with the group?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the video that you talked about, I have actually watched it and shared it with the students in my foundation. But I have a question for you. My son is a black boy. My son is a student in Stanford, and the recent incidents has really hit a raw nerve in him, and he's kind of been sharing it quite a lot on Twitter. Now, the Out Your Silence, would that be a useful tool for him to use to have community conversations with his friends, with his community?
Mm-hmm. It is. Any tool that empowers people to speak up against inequities, injustice, disrespectful behavior, words, any tools. Again, more tools we can provide to each other. Some things we might feel comfortable with and some things we won't. But this is a tool. It's a wonderful tool. It has 4 scenarios. In each scenario, you can literally feel like you've been there. Someone's supposed to be was looking for a promotion, but they didn't, quote, have the look. Okay, what's the look, people? What's the look, right? It allows people to have be able to respond with some thought. It allows you to take a pause before responding. So I would say yes on that.
Where can we get that tool?
Right online, and I don't know where I'll leave it, but I'll put someplace online, and maybe it's in response to this at the end. I can type in some of the links for that.
Okay, excellent.
Sure.
Chelsea had a comment too. Chelsea, if you want to
Okay.
give your comment. You're able to unmute yourself now. I see that you joined a little later. I can just read. So Chelsea said to comment that they all value people over property. They know that people are the largest currency and they have the highest ROI.
Mm-hmm.
And then Terry says, just the title is pretty brilliant. So everyone should be able to talk, so feel free
Okay.
to.
Please, and at some point, let me get through this PowerPoint because then I can take the PowerPoint down and see the people. Because I'm trying to be with the program. Let me just keep moving here quickly. All right, so some of the core values, and again, every organization should have values. If they don't, I would encourage maybe one of the first things that can be done is that they articulate what they are. But these are just some definitions, and how do we create a shared understanding of what this looks like? What does it mean to practice, we have justice within our workplace? What does it mean to practice equity, quality of being fair, impartial, fairness and impartiality? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it mean for outreach, recruitment, hiring, learning and development, promotion, compensation, access to benefits, mentors, pipeline development, rotational assignments, right? What does equity look like? We need to be able to see it. We need to be able to talk about it in terms of quantitative, qualitative, and anecdotal being the narrative that we need to be able to tell. So that as we're moving there, we know what we're looking for. What does it feel like to be paid fairly? What would that feel like, right? So again, how do we align our workplace, our values with our practices? And so at their best, values are character strength, character of the individual, as well as the character of the institution, right? They're enacted in time, investment, and behavior, right? As well as words. An inclusive practice, how do we flexibility and fairness, leveraging diversity as an asset? Who just made the comment about people as being the greatest asset of an organization? Well, then how is it invested in? How is it developed? How is it expanded so that it gives the opportunity for the fullness of mission? How do we begin to create and enable a culture, inclusive culture, that is an indicator of our current as well as our future success, right? I put this up here. This is from Franklin Covey, and it's the speed of trust. And the reason I put it, because we talk about the credibility, right? Living up to our values, right? The character strength. At their best, our values are character strength for an individual as well as an institution. And part of credibility goes to our character and our competence, right? Our character being integrity and intent, right? That's why it's the tree below ground, you can't really see it. And then competence is about capability and results. And again, you can get this, it's called Speed of Trust from Franklin Covey. I do work with them as one of my collaborating business partners, and we do a lot of trust work with leadership in federal agencies. And then again, just what these things are, our character is our integrity and our intent, right? The integrity that we bring as individuals. So that's why speaking up becomes part of just that integrity that we have. Do we sit back and watch people be harmed, right? Or do we say something, seek to do something, right? Our intent is what motivates us. Are we being motivated by the values that we hold, right? Our competence goes to our capabilities and our results. How do we create an environment where we can bring our talent, right? Our attitudes, what does that then mean? I work, oftentimes I have this thing called dreams: dress for success, reach and take risk, E for education, A, attitude, 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 an attitude of gratitude, right? And oftentimes for women and young girls, we don't know we need to be able to fake it till we make it, because half the times we're acting like we need to have a whole bunch of credentialing to do roles and responsibilities that we've been watching fellas do with limited capability. Yet we feel like we have to overdo. So that attitude is sometimes important to be able to have the confidence, right? We need skills, knowledge, and style. So I love this definition of capabilities: task, TASKS, and then the notion of our competence, our results, kind of the past, the current, and the anticipated performance. The past performance around equity in too many institutions isn't looking good. So what can we learn about it, and how do we use this current moment in order to be able to change and create better results tomorrow, in the future? Part of this, when we talk about equity, why are we still having a debate about bathrooms? Why? I'm asking someone to answer that question for me, please. Why? I guess that's the answer. And nobody got an answer. But why are we having this debate? It's about equity, right? Choose to eliminate the structural barriers to equity. If we did nothing else, let's just get the bathrooms together. Basic human need. If women controlled medicine, New World Order, people, a form of equity. If you're laughing, you can put your volume on. If you're not laughing, you can put your volume on.
Yes, I was laughing.
Who was laughing?
Carrie.
Uh-huh. It's true. Think about it. We have an opportunity to flip the world right now. I truly believe that. What is, think about it. Women are seen as what? Compassion, caregivers. What do we need in the world right now? Compassion and
Caregivers. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so maybe this is this opportunity to flip it. Right? This is a form of equity. Okay, you know, fellas, we can either use this as an examination tool, or maybe we can think of something different.
This is Juanita again. And, you know, I went to my OBGYN, and I know this kind of like goes toward that and I had an IUD, and the IUD got stuck in my cervical canal, and that OBGYN, this woman, ripped it out of my body. And I told her, I said, shame on you. Shame on you for not creating something that you don't have to rip out of a woman's body. And you're a woman. You know, I just was like, oh my gosh, why would you have told me that this was a better idea than getting, you know, taking the pill or a shot? And so I never got it again, but I just thought, wow, it had to have been a man who developed this. Yeah. And why aren't we stepping up to make change so that we don't have to have that ripping out of that device out of your body?
Yeah, but this is what equity is about. How do we create those environments, those spaces? In technology, you know, one of the things we talked about earlier today in Michelle's presentation this morning about the notion around artificial intelligence, right? And she talked about the portion of the economy, 86% of jobs are in service or construction, right? People intensive. And yet, and because many of the other jobs have been automated, right? But she's saying that now we're going to begin to look at automation as some of these other things, and artificial intelligence, but we don't want to embed the same bias. So going right to your point, we need to have women in these areas. We need that. What are you all doing here? Women in Technology International. How do we empower you as a collective, empower you to start taking greater ownership of this technology, so that we can have equity? So that's part of the, you know, Carolyn talked about innovation. Let us come forward, right? And innovate, create the space for us to innovate. We get to choose our response. Nobody makes you angry, you decide to use anger as a response. So instead of just constantly being angry at the system, what else can we do? What else can we do, right? We can find some solutions, some strategies, be willing to take a brave step, to step out, to lift up our voices, to identify the actions. Don't wait for them to tell you what we need to do. Let's give lists with metrics and the accountability. You know, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills, right? So we have this opportunity that we can either continue to do what we have done, right? Build that wall, right? Or we can look for something that's more aspirational, that can give us some hope, a new direction, a different way of doing it. You know, sometimes sometimes things are just need to be changed. This can't be the same thing. We need something that's different. We can continue distancing and walking around with us, like kind of in this wall, the chrysalis to some degree, with no effort, just walking casually, or we can move ahead trying something new and different. We really are at this inflection point, you know, in society, to be different, to do different, but it has to begin with each one of us being willing to step into the brave space and think through specifically, what are some of the things that I can do to make a difference? And then we can ask our organizations to demonstrate institutional courage. This is some of the most brilliant work that I have seen on organizational culture by Dr. Jennifer Freyd. I put this in again. I know folks are going to ask me for the link, so we'll just make sure we put that link. But her work on institutional courage, it's an institutional commitment to seek the truth and engage in moral action despite unpleasantness, risk, and short-term cost, right? We're already suffering, right, from our institutions, consequent to this, the confluence of these crises. It's a pledge to protect and care for those who depend on the institution. So if your company or your organization has put forward a statement in support of eliminating systemic racism or justice or if any, because hundreds of companies have put it forward, read it, ask people about it. What does this mean? How do we live it? What role do I play? How do we hold ourselves accountable? You all said we're going to do this. Now, what does it mean? Let me help you with what it means. How do we step into that space, right? It's a compass oriented to the common good of individuals, the institution, and the world. It's a force that transforms institutions into more accountable, equitable, and healthy places for everyone. That's what we seek, right? How do we get the institutional courage to build on our ability to create brave space and to act? We can choose to share in the good that abounds. It's a different perspective. My good friend and colleague who's up, her election, she's being voted, hopefully voted into Congress today, Allison Fine, she has a book called Matterness. And so you share the good that abounds. And she's talked about looking at the world through a lens of abundance enables organizations to recognize and connect with a large number of staff, people, and constituents who want to help. Abundance thinking creates organizational cultures that allow staffers to step up safely and smartly into the world, right? A shifting of culture, right? Don't need to keep all the information to yourself. We can share, we can learn. It's not limited. Do you welcome my ideas as an institution for innovation, right? Empathy, right? And generosity of spirit. You know, I love this of the rhino with the baby rhino. I love that, kind of just resting, gently resting. And this was something I think from either Facebook, I don't remember, Facebook or Twitter. I'll never forget what my daughter said after her best friend was subjected to a racist comment on the school bus one afternoon, Stafford wrote. I asked her if she was okay, my child said tearfully. She didn't say anything, so I just scooted closer. Reluctantly, she admitted, I didn't know what to do, Mama, so I just hurt with her. Empathy. Empathy. How do we show that for one another when we create a space for equity? Empathy. How do we demonstrate that? How do we create that workspace? Right? How do we create the workspace where we practice respect and we can do things as simple as using appropriate pronouns? Right? Ask the person, you know, what pronoun do you use? How best should I identify? How best would you like me to identify? Right? And they change. So a pronoun that I use today may not be the pronoun I use next week. And that's okay. That's accepting humanity for who humanity is, people for who they are, the fullness of who they are, the fullness of expression, right? As a team, seeing the me and we, how do we see ourselves as a collective? That's the empathy, the caring, the compassion, right? The things that we say the world needs right now, right? As an individual, finding freedom from what holds me back. Right? That's why we have to look at the I, the self-trust, the cores of credibility, right? What holds me back from being the best of who I am? This really has been an opportunity for us to reflect, to turn within. When you had a moment, you didn't have a whole bunch of people running around in the house while everybody was trying to use the internet. But for the most part, we have had some time to reflect, right? And how do we see the me and we? What role can I play?
Was right. She was right. She was right.
I can hear someone. Is someone talking?
No.
Oh, okay. Practice accountability and don't spin. I love the one on the left. I did a push-up today. Well, actually, I fell down, but I had to use my arms to get back up. So close enough. Right? Don't spin. Integrity. Right? Accountability. I got called pretty today. Well, actually, the full statement was you're pretty annoying, but I only focus on the positive things. I'm okay with that.
I love that.
Isn't that great?
Great.
And the push-up thing, I think about that every day. I read an article that if you think about exercising, you're burning calories.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. And gratitude. How do we demonstrate gratitude? Part of creating an environment where there's equity is appreciation and gratitude. You know, to have joy, you must share it, right? Remind yourself it's okay not to be perfect. Give thanks for what you have and who you are. Mhm. Be grateful. Be grateful for the colleague that speaks up. Be grateful to the colleague that while you're on a internet or a Zoom and somebody says something inappropriate, somebody puts something in the chat and they say, ouch. Way to stop. Why are you saying ouch? Well, here's how I heard this. Is that what was intended? Right? How do we create a community of practice, right? Or groups of people who share a concern or a passion for doing something they do and learn and how to do it better as they interact regularly, right? Intentionally addressing the issues at hand. You know, what are the issues at hand in your workplace that deny equity, deny dignity? How can you bring it up? Who else can you bring it up with? Who else has been saying similar stuff that's kind of sound the same way? Right? Express a commitment to creating change. If your organization has made a statement, guess what? It has expressed a commitment to creating change. Hold them accountable. Problem solving, accessing information. How do we do this as a collective? How do I identify some of the things that we need to do? And importantly, what are some of the solutions that we can try? It may not work. We don't have to be perfect, but we need to do something a little bit different, right? And then how do we do so in a way that's coordinated in a strategy? You know, one of the things we know in workplaces, and I said it in an earlier session, is that oftentimes we see organizations having a lot of different activity going on around diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, inclusivity, belonging, a lot of stuff, and the culture doesn't seem to really be changing too much. You know, is it connected to a cogent strategy, or is it just a lot of activity, a lot of churn and burn of energy? But is it creating the systemic and the institutional change that we want to see? That requires a strategy and a will to coordinate. You know, be present, learn from the past, you know. And this is from Spencer Johnson's book. I love that book too. The Present. Short, quick read. He also wrote Who Moved My Cheese? But plan for the future when you want to make the future better than the present. We could go back to what we started with, right? It's energy. We get to create what we want for tomorrow. We can see what a wonderful future would look like. We can make plans to make it happen, and we can put our plans into action in the present. So we do this in the now in order to prepare for tomorrow. So the present. And then connecting to our higher power, our power within, self-care and showing up. In order to show up the fullness and the best of who you are, you got to take care of yourself. And that means you're connecting to your power within. Whatever that might be. Find it for yourself. You know, they say put on your mask before you help someone else, right? Self-care, clarity of purpose. What are my values? What are the things that are important to me for my work? And that we're all connected, and as a collective, we weave the threads of our interaction. How do we do this together? How are we interacting with our colleagues, our teammates, our peers, the others that we're in communication with, our networks? We can choose to center all of this in equity. You know, and I love this sign, and this came from Psychology Today, right? We welcome all races and ethnicities, all religions, all countries of origin, all gender identities, all sexual orientation, all abilities and disabilities, all spoken language, all ages, everyone. We stand here with you. You are safe here. And if not safe, let's try to make sure that we create a brave space. So with that, I appreciate your attention, your time. Thank you. Josh, can we take down the PowerPoint, or do I do that?
Yeah, so you do that. So just
Okay.
stop share. There you
Got
go.
it. Did it. See, my
Everyone can
technology skills are
talk.
moving up. All right, so I can now see the chats. Okay.
Hi,
Wonderful.
Renee, it's Terry again. You said something earlier that just really hit me, I guess, as Oprah would say, an aha moment. When you were talking about, you know, we have the compassion and, you know, caretaking and all of that sort of ability, and thinking of where the world is right now and what we need, it's kind of like, yes, and there's more to it, right? I think about it is, and what my beautiful mother taught me many years ago, trying to feed 8 kids with a potato, is that you got to go back to basics, right? And basics is everyone needs food, everyone needs healthcare, we need equality, everybody needs jobs,
Yeah.
they need passion, they need a home. And I just almost like, this is the moment where we,
Yes.
doesn't have to be complicated. We don't have to have millions of people and consultants involved. It's kind of like we are back to the basics of living and community and people and being connected, and it's almost like a natural state, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what I'm going to do about that, but it just kind of hit me.
No, but being aware of it, right? A body at rest will remain at rest until disturbed by an outside force. We were going along, kind of making progress, not really, kind of making some, feeling a little better because we did one thing, but then it didn't last, right?
Yeah.
We got stopped as a world. I'd say Mother Nature said, look, I'm help you people. Right? Stop. We have to pause. Right? And so getting back to the basics, what Maslow's hierarchy, what does it start out with? Our basic physiologic needs. That's where we are. And where does that care, compassion? You listed them all. And so we have an opportunity to recognize that's where we are and that's what we need. And how do we create institutions and help create institutions through our voice, our action, our attitude, our will to change, our will to help change. That creates a very different world in which we operate, a new norm, a better norm.
Yes. That's the good side of all this. I knew there'd be a bright side, and I've been seeing it lately. So
yeah, just the outpouring that we've seen consequent to the killing of Mr. Floyd.
yes.
Right? It's a different people. I mean, we've never seen. I mean, corporations really stepping up and again, but hold them accountable. We don't want it just a momentary, oh God, I feel bad right now. Let me say something. Well, your words matter, right? And now we have something in which we as an organization can strive towards bringing that vision, whatever your statement is, bringing it to reality.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm a sports fan, but the Colin Kaepernick, oh, I get it now. Like, okay, hello.
Yeah.
Finally.
And the notion is, again, it's the irony to some degree, what you had said earlier, kind of like Mother Nature and, the call for health and wellness and the basics, and he took a knee for what? For justice and equity. And the police officer took a knee for death and destruction.
Yeah.
Right? And so now we're going to have a conversation about patriotism. No. Wrong conversation.
Exactly.
Terry, thank you.
This is Juanita again. I've had more conversations since all of this, marching and protesting and, things have been coming more to light about white privilege and the difference between white privilege and, hardship, right? I understand a lot of, people that are white have had hardship, but that is not the same as white privilege. And let me tell you, the conversations, I cannot even, I've at least had like in the last maybe, I don't know, 10 days, maybe more than like 25 conversations just about that particular subject and now how that affects our working relationship or how we work with one another in our specific areas, and recognizing when you have white privilege or, being an ally, it's, man, let me tell you, but I think these are good conversations. There was a time where I was like, I'm tired of educating people, but, I've been reinvigorated, right? And so now I'm like, yes, I will engage in these conversations again.
Yeah. Thank you. We have to. We can't run from these conversations. We don't remedy anything that way. That's what we've been doing forever and a day, right? A good colleague of mine, Amy Bertain, does brilliant work on privilege and fragility. And, she talks about kind of 4 key elements around this white privilege, the notion around the legacy of historical advantage, right? The notion of what creates belonging, right? How different you don't belong. You don't belong in this neighborhood. You don't belong in the swimming pool. You don't belong in the store. What you doing there in the store? Belonging, right? The notion of how white privilege and white supremacy have tried to define what professionalism is, Renee, you're not professional because you don't have a hair. Oh, you should have bought a wig. Because women wear wigs, they all have hair. Only men are bald. Okay, professionalism, right? And then then the notion of how white people show up. You know, are they prepared to have a conversation? Are they prepared to do a self-examination? You know, is there a real will to learn, to be different, to do different, to ask, to take the brave step and say, you know, why is this room so white and pale in the room? Why is this room so male looking?
Yes.
Why is this room my grandfather's age group looking? You know, we can ask those questions. We might not say it like that out loud, but we need to ask those questions and find a way at the moment to be able to ask the question. Right? And white privilege is one of those things that we need to be able to ask people to recognize. If you have it, we do an exercise. What do you like about your race? Okay. What do you like about your race? And people of color will give you a list. I see Keisha, let me grab you in a minute. We'll give a list of things. And a lot of white folks who know they have privilege don't want to say anything. And they then express feeling anxious and upset that part of what they have about the race is the privilege and how it denies other people dignity. So I say, well, if I was white, I would use my privilege to address these problems, right? Because you have some space to do it. You got to talk to other white folks, right? And that's what she says. How are white people showing up? Are white folks prepared to have this conversation amongst themselves? To learn and to listen. Keisha, you had your hand up or you did something, a chat, a quip. Saw a hand. Okay, let me keep moving. Oh, there you are. I see your hands raised. Now, do I need to let you in or something? Hold on. Or you just saying hello? I can't see. So y'all gonna have to work with me. This is part of this new era. People like myself are gonna have to get better at Zoom. All right, folks, I think we are at about time. Let me just appreciate you all. Thank you all for your time this afternoon, for your efforts, your will to make this place better, to speak up, to focus and think about equity as the basis by which we now move forward and make assessment as to, are these policies good? Are our practices in line? How are we demonstrating the dignity? Are we respecting each person? Are we valuing people? Are we creating a workspace where they can bring the best of who they are? Am I bringing the best of who I am in service to mission? Am I speaking up? Am I offering my suggestions since my company made a statement on what that statement actually means to me and how we can actually practice it? So there's so many ways in which we can engage and allow our span of control to be part of the ripple that creates the sustained change for equity. So thank you all. Be well, be happy, and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Have a good day.
Renee, before you go off, are we getting the slides?
I don't know. See, now you're asking me technical questions here. Okay. I believe that this is all going to be up and available for 30 days.
Okay, so I know the recording will be, but I'm not sure about the slides.
Yeah,
But
I think they are. I mean, I'm making mine available to whatever the process is that they are going to use for, you know, communicating the information that was imparted during the summit.
okay, another one is that I sent you a friend request on LinkedIn a year ago.
Okay.
A year ago, so please accept it. It's 1 year old.
You sent me a link, but let me just say, do not take that as a personal, take that as Renee's social media skills and time. Do not take it, because my own brother, who was like, you can't click accept on LinkedIn. I said, okay, I will go and look for your thing. Send it again, because then maybe it's at the top. I don't know how it works.
Okay, I'll send it again to you.
Send it again, because I have no, if it's not immediately, now that you sent it, now my LinkedIn does send me email notices to look at it. So I will, can
Look
act
at
accordingly.
Okay, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You be well. Thank you all.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let's see. Is Josh still on? I think he's in another meeting. Josh? Okay. All right.